The morning sun dappled through the canopy of Elena's heritage oak, painting shifting patterns on her worn patio stones. She cradled her coffee, breathing in the familiar scent of pine needles and damp earth from the cluster of tall trees bordering her property. These weren't just trees. They were decades-old sentinels. This oak witnessed her children's tire swings. The pines sheltered generations of cardinals and squirrels, their rustling leaves a constant, soothing whisper masking the distant suburban hum. They offered cool shade, privacy from the McMansion looming uphill, and a profound sense of rooted sanctuary she cherished. The HOA letters started subtly vague references to view obstruction, impacting community aesthetics and value. President Bradley Finch, who lived uphill with a coveted vista, became the persistent voice. "Regulations, Elena," he'd state at the annual meeting, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Your magnificent trees, sadly, infringe on established view corridors. Think of the property values." Elena fought back, citing grandfathering clauses, her property surveys proving the trees were indisputably hers, and the irreplaceable value they held beyond mere scenery. She pointed to the bylaws requiring proper notice and hearings, which she felt were being deliberately sidestepped. Then came the dawn she'd never forget. The brutal, mechanical roar shattered the morning peace before sunrise. Heart-pounding, Elena raced outside in her robe and slippers. The scene was carnage. Contractors, marked with the HOA's landscaping logo, were already deep into their work. Chainsaw teeth screamed, biting into the thick trunk of her beloved oak. Finch stood near the property line, arms crossed, mirrored sunglasses reflecting the destruction. "Stop! You can't do this!" Elena screamed, her voice raw. Finch barely glanced her way. "Final notice was issued, Mrs. Arden. HOA authority. Necessary maintenance for the greater good." The raw, ragged stumps were obscene wounds in the earth. Elena stood in the center of the devastation, the morning sun now a harsh, exposing glare where dappled light once danced. The air hung heavy with the smell of shredded wood and sap, the comforting chorus of birds replaced by an unnatural, ringing silence. Her fingers brushed the rough, violently exposed rings of the oak stump. Decades of growth ended in minutes. Shredded bark littered the ground like confetti at a funeral. Uphill, the McMansion's windows stared down, unobstructed, its owners doubtless enjoying their newly purchased panorama. The official letter arrived later that day, slipped under her door like a coward's note. It cited unauthorized vegetation removal as a necessary landscaping upgrade performed under HOA authority per Bylaw 7.4a. And coolly informed her a fine for non-compliance leading to enforcement costs would be levied. No apology, no acknowledgement of trespass or destruction. When she confronted Finch at the management office, his expression was one of bored impatience. "The view corridors are critical to community standards and value, Elena. Frankly, you should be thanking us. That thicket was an eyesore and a fire hazard. We've enhanced your property value." His dismissal was absolute, his tone implying she was the unreasonable one. The grief was a physical ache, a hollow where her sanctuary had been. Tears came, hot and furious, but they quickly dried into something colder, harder. The exposed dirt began to erode with the first rain. The shade vanished, baking her patio. She researched. Initial consultations with lawyers were discouraging. HOAs have wide latitude. Bylaws are binding. Tree law is complex, valuations tricky. Then, a neighbor, equally wary of Finch's regime, whispered a name: Maya Rodriguez. Elena met the sharp-eyed environmental attorney, laying out the carnage with photos, surveys, and Finch's chilling letter. Maya's gaze hardened as she flipped through the evidence. "Unauthorized vegetation? On your property?" she murmured. "This isn't just about tree value, Elena. This is trespass. This is wanton destruction. This Maya said, tapping Finch's letter. Is arrogance begging for a reckoning? A spark ignited in Elena's chest, fierce and bright, burning away the despair. She spat a cherry pit onto the barren ground. Then let's give them one. The legal machinery ground to life, a stark contrast to the brutal simplicity of chainsaws. Maya Rodriguez attacked with precision. A renowned arborist delivered a gut punch valuation. Replacing the mature trees wasn't a matter of saplings, but of sourcing and installing near equivalents, costing over $250,000. Detailed property surveys, stamped and undeniable, proved the trees stood entirely within Elena's deeded land. Maya subpoenaed HOA communications, unearthing emails where Finch dismissed Elena's hysterical attachment to weeds and pushed for immediate resolution before she lawyers up. They documented the environmental damage, increased erosion, loss of wildlife habitat, the soaring cooling costs for Elena's now sun-blasted home. The HOA's lawyers responded with the bludgeon of bureaucracy, thick binders of bylaws granting broad authority for view preservation and aesthetic maintenance. They argued the trees were a nuisance, their value grossly inflated, and Elena had constructively consented by not complying fully with vague notices. They painted her as unreasonable, resistant to community standards. Court-ordered mediation was a farce. Finch, flanked by his attorney, radiated contempt. He offered a derisory $15,000 goodwill gesture, contingent on Elena signing a release absolving the HOA and dropping all claims. Consider it compensation for the unsightly mess we cleaned up for you, he stated. Maya countered with the evidence, the trespass, the destruction, the punitive damages warranted by their conduct. Finch scoffed. Not a cent more. We acted within our rights. He pushed back from the table, mediation collapsed. The lawsuit escalated, draining Elena's savings and resolve. The HOA launched a whisper campaign among neighbors, painting her as the difficult homeowner, dragging everyone into costly litigation, jeopardizing property values she supposedly damaged. Anonymous notes appeared. The stress was a constant weight. Yet, seeing Finch's sneer in the deposition video, hearing the callousness in his emails, fueled her. He thinks he's untouchable, Maya said, reviewing trial strategy. Elena looked out at her ravaged yard, then at the cherry sapling she'd planted in a pot, a fragile symbol of defiance. Then we touch him, she said, her voice steady. We touch him where it hurts. Preparation for trial became her new, arduous sanctuary. The air in the courtroom crackled with tension thicker than the oak paneling. Maya Rodriguez moved with the lethal grace of a predator circling wounded prey. She laid out the devastation methodically. Drone footage showing the stark before and after moonscape of Elena's property. The arborist's staggering valuation report held aloft like an indictment. The property surveys proving trespass beyond dispute. She forced the HOA's own landscaping contractor to admit under oath that Elena had physically tried to stop them, screaming that they were on her land. Did President Finch countermand your crew? Maya asked pointedly. The contractor shifted, glancing at Finch. He reiterated the HOA had authority. Finch took the stand, radiating misplaced confidence. Maya dismantled him. His claim of necessary maintenance withered under photos showing healthy trees. His insistence on proper notice collapsed when Maya produced certified mail receipts showing key documents Elena never received. His demeanor turned brittle, then openly hostile. Those trees were a blight, he snapped when pressed about community value. A juror winced. Then the killing blow. Mr. Finch, Maya began, her voice dangerously soft. You testified you acted solely for the community's benefit. Is that accurate? Finch bristled. Absolutely. Maya turned to the judge. Your Honor, permission to play defense Exhibit D. Finch paled. It was an internal HOA email chain. Finch's own words boomed through the courtroom. Elena Arden's obstinate refusal view corridors is unacceptable. Her sentimentality over a few old sticks is tanking uphill values. Need to resolve this decisively before she finds some ambulance chaser. Expedite removal. Consequences later. Silence. Utter, deafening silence. Finch looked like he'd been gut-punched. Maya let the words hang. Expedite removal. Consequences later. Not community benefit, Mr. Finch. Preemptive destruction to avoid legal action. Malice. She turned to the jury. Consequences are later. The jury deliberated for less than a day. The foreperson's voice was steady as she read the verdicts. Trespass. Destruction of property. Emotional distress. Punitive damages. The total figure, $1.4 million, echoed like a thunderclap. Gasps ripped through the room. Finch slumped, his face ashen. Elena sat perfectly still, tears finally breaking free, tracing clean paths down her cheeks as Maya squeezed her hand. The gavel cracked once, sharp and final. Justice, brutal and expensive, had been served. The chainsaw's roar was finally silenced by the weight of the law. The euphoria of the $1.4 million verdict was brutally short-lived. The HOA's lawyers filed an immediate appeal, throwing the judgment into a legal limbo that froze collection. Their insurance company, citing the egregious nature of the punitive damages and Finch's proven malice, refused to cover the bulk of the award. Standard policies don't cover willful trespass and destruction, Maya explained grimly. The HOA itself was suddenly hemorrhaging cash, drowning in legal fees. Finch, desperate and cornered, convinced the fractured board to levy a crushing special assessment on all homeowners to fund the appeal and potentially cover the judgment. Letters hit mailboxes demanding tens of thousands per household. Overnight, Elena's hard-won victory made her a pariah. Neighbors who'd privately sympathized now glared. Anonymous, angry notes appeared again. Selfish B****. Sell your house and pay your own bill. The community Finch claimed to protect was tearing itself apart, and Elena bore the brunt of the fury, her home feeling like a besieged fortress. Her own savings dwindled under the ongoing legal costs Maya warned were necessary to defend the appeal and enforce the judgment. Maya, however, was relentless. She filed liens against the HOA's assets, the clubhouse pool, the playground equipment, the maintenance sheds. She initiated garnishment proceedings, intercepting monthly HOA dues before they reached the association's coffers. Each move was a tightening vice, squeezing the HOA's operational lifeline. The appeal process was agonizingly slow. A year of tense waiting, hostile neighbors, and financial strain that eroded Elena's initial triumph into weary anxiety. Finally, the appellate court's decision landed. Affirmed. The judgment stood firm, the $1.4 million plus accrued interest and costs now a crushing, undeniable mountain of debt. The HOA was functionally bankrupt. Their lawyers admitted they had no cash, no means to pay. The special assessment had barely covered the appeal costs. Maya presented the final, devastating solution: forced sale of assets. The only HOA property valuable enough? The sprawling, meticulously maintained common area parcel bordering Elena's ravaged yard. The very land offering the view corridor Finch had murdered her trees to create. Elena stood in the pouring rain, staring across her muddy wasteland at the lush, untouched lawn that had been the hill's prized vista. The ultimate, bitter irony. That land, she whispered, a hard smile finally touching her lips, is about to have a very different view. Justice wasn't just served. It was about to be landscaped. The heavy, embossed document felt like redemption in Elena's hands. The deed transferring Parcel G, the HOA's crown jewel common area bordering her property, solely to her. Finch's signature was a jagged scrawl of defeat. The HOA's official seal, pressed beside it, felt like a tombstone. The association dissolved within weeks, drowned by the judgment and resident fury over Finch's special assessment. Finch himself vanished, rumored to have moved out of state, leaving only infamy behind. Elena walked her new land alone at dawn. The grass, professionally manicured for their view, was dew-damp under her worn sneakers. She traced the invisible line where HOA authority had ended and her old oaks began, now just ragged stumps on her side. The silence was profound, peaceful. No more HOA edicts, no Finch. This land, stolen from her through the destruction of her trees, was now hers through the destruction of his arrogance. A tentative voice broke the quiet. Mrs. Henderson, a longtime resident who'd initially blamed Elena for the assessment, stood nervously by the old community sign, now defunct. "Elena, it's beautiful land," she offered, her eyes avoiding the stumps. What will you do with it?" The unspoken fear hung heavy. "Will you build a monstrosity? Block our views now?" Elena looked at the woman, then across the expanse to her own ravaged yard. She saw the potted cherry sapling, now taller, waiting. "I'm going to plant trees, Carol," Elena said, her voice calm, firm. "Lots of them. Native oaks, maples, pines. A grove. Maybe a small garden path here, eventually. Something alive." Relief, then shame, flickered across Mrs. Henderson's face. "Oh, that sounds lovely." Later, Elena stood where her heritage oak had fallen. Surveyor's stakes marked the new boundary within her expanded domain. Beside the largest stump, she dug a deep hole. The cherry sapling's roots settled into the earth that had nurtured its predecessors. She tamped the soil gently, then stood, her hand resting on the rough bark of the young tree, looking towards the newly planted future on Parcel G. The chainsaws were gone. The lawyers were gone. Finch was gone. Only the whisper of the wind through the young cherry leaves remained, and the deep, unshakable certainty of roots reclaiming their ground. Justice finally had taken root.